In those critical hours between noon and 2 p.m., thousands of Joseph E. Johnson's men would arrive by railroad and join ranks under the command of a little-known general named Thomas Jonathan Jackson. As the battle entered a critical phase, what had been fierce fighting turned ferocious. Battered but unbowed, the Confederates under General Bernard B. retreated from Matthews Hill to nearby Henry Hill.
As B was falling back toward Henry House Hill, he galloped up onto the hill to see what troops, if any, were there to give him an anchor. And there he encountered his old West Point comrade, Thomas J. Jackson. And B said something to the effect, "General, they're pushing us back," to which Jackson very calmly then said, "Well, sir, we shall give them the bayonet."
Jackson's personal style was a clenched-jawed determination, a stern power of will to succeed. And on a field peopled by military innocents on both sides of the line, Jackson's determination, his intentness on winning, his confidence that he was doing God's will, these things combined to make him a rock.
With that reinforcement from Jackson, B rode back down the hill, and in the bottom, as his disorganized men were falling back, B looked up atop Henry House Hill, pointed and shouted above the din of battle, "Look, men, there stands Jackson like a stone wall, rally behind the Virginians."
In that moment, the legend of Stonewall Jackson was born. Confederate troops did rally around Jackson and his brigade, fortifying Henry Hill. Undaunted, Union soldiers charged up the hill.
If they could secure that hill, they could turn the entire Confederate army. And from their vantage point down in the valley, looking up to the hill, it looked empty. And so, of course, they charge up this hill with great enthusiasm. And about 30 yards from the top of this hill, suddenly, from behind the brow of the hill, up rises this Confederate brigade from the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, which just delivered a point-blank volley of musketry right into their faces.
With Jackson's forces gaining strength, McDowell brought out the Union cannons.
They rolled 2 artillery batteries up to within about 300 yards of Jackson's line. Jackson's men hunker down below the slope of the hill. Union shells whistle over their heads. What McDowell apparently wanted to do was to roll his cannon up and blast a hole in the Confederate line. That's what Napoleon had done. But Napoleon didn't have rifles to contend with.
Confederate guns from atop the hill decimated the artillerymen.
There was never such a destructive fire. It looked as if every horse and man of that battery just laid down and died right off. Union Lieutenant William Averill.
A regiment of New York fire swabs, the same men who had caroused in Washington, were rushed in to support the artillery.
These men who hadn't quite figured out yet how you deploy exactly from column into line were sort of stumbling about the field, their officers shouting and cursing, trying to get them in some sort of formation.
Into the confusion rode Colonel James Ewell Brown Stewart and his Virginia cavalry.
And as Jeb Stuart and his horsemen plowed into the fire zouaves, those zealous New York firemen felt their patriotism draining out of them, and many of them then and there took to their heels.